Good morning, colleagues and students, and ladies and gentlemen. Also, Professor Chen and also Professor Mihailidis. We are very happy that we have today have our distinguished speaker, Professor Alex Mihailidis from University of Toronto. Professor Alex Mihailidis actually is the Associate Vice President for UT. So this is why I'm particularly happy because he is still working actively on this topic, aging. So actually, our peer secretary is so kind, prepared 2 pages of introduction for you. So it will take me 20 minutes to read it. So I will just very briefly introduce Alex. Professor Mihailidis, I just call you Alex because it's very challenging for me. So Alex has been actually here for several times, and he's our peer fellow, one of peer fellows. I'm not sure whether any of you know what is the full name of peer. We have some bonus for you. PolyU Academy. I hope I will not be spelling wrong, for interdisciplinary research. Okay, so this basically the flagship of our PolyU to group many people together in all different fields. So we have many research institute and research center on different areas. Today, I think you are particularly interested in aging. So I'm the director for Smart Research Institute for Smart Aging. I'm also the director of Jockey Club Smart Aging Hub. So this is why I'm here to introduce Alex. So Alex has been taking a role as the scientific director already for, I think, over 13 years. Yeah, that Age Well, like a platform, covers the whole Canada and supported by Canadian federal government. So, and try to help or in some way to link, okay, industry or all kind of stakeholders, government, and also the users, carers, okay, very similar to our Smart Aging Hub here. So, but we are a little young. So this is why we are discussing a lot of collaboration between Canada and Hong Kong. So Alex has been served in a lot of international organizations and won a lot of awards. I just do not want to name that. You just search Alex's name in the Google, you'll find that. So, and today we are particularly happy that Alex can talk about two very big topics: aging and large language model. So basically, maybe this is the two largest like topic in the world. Okay, very soon Hong Kong have 30% of elderly people aged than 65. Remember, 1 out of 3, okay, of the population. I think it's similar in Canada and as well as many places. So I believe, okay, the challenge is big enough. But meanwhile, the AI, particularly represented by ChatGPT, is another hot topic. So we are so happy today Alex will connect these two topics with us together and to give us some inspiration and the thinking, and hopefully there's many collaborations. So without further ado, so I will pass to Alex. Please join me to welcome our distinguished guests.
Thanks so much for having me here. It's always a pleasure for me to come to PolyU. I think I've been collaborating in some way with PolyU for at least 10 years now across various disciplines, including occupational therapy, rehabilitation sciences, engineering, and now in the past few years, obviously, with the PAIR program itself and the Research Institute for Smart Aging. And I think you know, the PAIR model that you have here is exactly what is needed to solve many of the problems that we're looking at with respect to the aging population. You know, we need, you know, the engineers, the computer scientists who can help develop the technologies, but perhaps, and more importantly, in a lot of cases, we need the people who understand the human behavior side of things, the social sciences. So we need the OTs, the PTs, the speech language pathologists, the rehab scientists, the family doctors, et cetera. It really does take an entire group of people across many disciplines in order to solve what we're doing here, not only in PAIR, but in the Age Well program back in Canada, and really with our partners around the world. And that's the other key thing here as well, is this is truly a global problem and phenomena. I'm not going to go over the usual slides of statistics of the aging population. We all know that the world's getting older. One of the key things I always like to point out is, while many people think that, you know, a fast and rapid aging population is the only thing that's happening in Hong Kong and other parts of Asia, it's also happening in Canada. In fact, Canada is the only North American country that is labeled to be one of these super age countries where a third of our population will be over the age of 65 by the year 2030. And in fact, last year in our census, for the first time ever, we actually now have more people over the age of 65 than we do under the age of 65. So we do have quite a rapidly aging population as well. So I'm doing something different here for my talk. I've never given this talk before. This is the first time that it's being seen. So it's really looking now at, as was pointed out, you know, really the intersection of two big areas that are starting to develop. And obviously that is technology for older adults, but also now, you know, this new approach in artificial intelligence known as generative AI, and specifically large language models. Anyone here been using or looking at large language models? No one. Everyone. Well, so one person. So obviously there's a lot of well-known models out there. There's ChatGPT, which I don't think you can directly access from within Hong Kong, but there's ways of accessing it. But there's a lot of work that's happening around large language models. So what I'm going to do is start off with a brief overview of what large language models is and generative AI. And then again, talk at a very high level in terms of where do we think these types of approaches in generative AI can be applied in the development of better and hopefully more effective technologies to support older adults. So the first thing to disclaim is I did not write this presentation. ChatGPT did. So I wanted to see not only how well does a large language model like ChatGPT work, but I wanted to see what it knew about itself and using large language models in the support of older adults. And so you see on my on your left-hand side there, or sorry, my left-hand side, your right-hand side, basically the prompt that I gave it. It was a very, very simple prompt. And from that, it generated the slides that I'm going to show you. Now, part of this disclaimer, sorry, I'm blocking half people's views. Part of this disclaimer is I did not edit or change any of the content. I did not correct any of the content. All I'm going to do in my talk today is provide the narrative around this, right? So this will be an interesting experiment. I hope you can all bear with me as we go through this and see what happens. But I think this is going to be an interesting exercise because obviously if we're expecting things like generative AI and large language models to be able to help us develop technology that will care for our aging population, we would hope in the first place it can write a presentation about how it can care for older people as well. So
large language models, or LLMs, are advanced AI tools designed to understand.
I'm going to go back for 1 second here. So this video, completely generated by ChatGPT. Okay, so we're going to see how it explains itself to you and how it explains how these models can be used in elder care. So yeah, let's go back and forward.
Large language models, or LLMs, are advanced AI tools designed to understand and interact with us in human-like ways. For older adults, they can be a game changer, offering a range of supports that make daily life more manageable and enjoyable. LLMs can serve as personalized assistants, offering medication reminders or scheduling appointments with ease. They can also be invaluable resources for caregivers, providing instant access to medical information or advice on caregiving strategies, all while ensuring a level of companionship that can greatly reduce feelings of isolation among seniors. Furthermore, LLMs can help bridge the technology gap, interpreting complex digital tasks into simpler, voice-activated commands. This means older adults can send emails, operate smart home devices, or video chat with family without the steep learning curve of traditional tech. However, The integration of LLMs into daily life is not without its ethical considerations. Privacy and data security are paramount, as is ensuring these AI systems operate with transparency and fairness. It's about finding the balance between leveraging technology for its immense benefits while safeguarding against potential misuse. As we continue to develop and refine LLMs, the goal remains clear: to enhance the lives of older adults, making every day a bit easier, more connected, and full of possibility.
Okay, so wasn't a bad video. I think, gave an overall good message. And again, everything that is generated, that's not a real person who was narrating. And the interesting thing is how it actually added mannerisms to this person and almost kind of made her seem a bit awkward, right? Like she didn't quite know where to look and she didn't quite know what to do with her hands during the presentation. And so right there is kind of a first glimpse into what we can be doing around the advancing of things like chatbots, like virtual agents and other simulated approaches when we're looking to develop caregiving devices, right, that require the use of maybe a visual to provide prompts and reminders to people with dementia, or even interacting with the caregivers. And in fact, if I really wanted to, I could have uploaded a short sequence of video data of myself into that model, and it would have basically had me as the narrator, but basically generating what I want to, what I should be saying, and et cetera, moving forward. So very quickly, what are large language models? So LLMs are advanced AI systems that are capable of generating and understanding human-like text. Now, human-like text and the word text is a bit misleading because, as you just saw, it's not just about text, right? It can also generate and develop models that have different types of visual outputs, but it can also be trained not just on text information, but I can upload videos of people doing various activities. I can upload videos of a person with dementia completing self-care activities. And based on that video data, it can also generate models on how to respond to the person and even how to interact with the person as well. Now, the one thing I should mention is large language models and generative AI and even ChatGPT were invented at the University of Toronto. That's my home there. And so this is something that we've been studying for many, many years now, before its commercial availability. And also looking at different application areas. And so it's really helpful to have individuals like Professor Jeff Hinton, whose lab this all came out of at the University of Toronto, working side by side with us, and working side by side with the caregivers and with the older adults themselves, so that we have a complete understanding of not only the technical aspects, but as I'll talk about, some of the ethical and social aspects of using these types of generative AI models as well. So again, very quick at a high level, how do you actually develop a large language model? What are kind of the high-end steps? So the first is data collection. And this is where a first source of limitation comes in to using large language models and generative AI in this particular space of elder care, is you need massive amounts of data. We're talking about billions of data points that can allow the model to train itself properly and to generate a model that has some level of accuracy that is going to be acceptable when you're using this as a caregiver or in providing assistance or analyzing health data, et cetera. Now, I say this is a limitation because, it's a big problem in Canada. And from what I understand in conversations here in Hong Kong, and actually all around the world with people who are doing work in elder care, is these massive data sets do not exist, right? You tend to get very small data sets. You may be able to conduct and collect data from, a sample size of maybe 20, 50, 100 people if we're lucky. Even smaller than that if we're testing a new technology where we do not have the funding, or at least I don't have the funding to build 100 prototypes. We may have 2 or 3 prototypes of a technology that we're testing, collecting data on. And so this is one of the big first issues that needs to come up and that we need to solve, and solve collaboratively between all of us, is how do we generate larger data sets? Right? And the key aspect of that is sharing and sharing data sets. And this has come up in some of the meetings I've had here this week, but has also come up in previous visits here to PolyU as well, of how do we share the data that you are collecting around elder care and different types of technologies, and how do we share our data and collectively put it together. Now, the interesting thing here is large language models can also, and actually quite well, synthesize data as well. And so we've done some experiments where we've taken a small data set of about 1,000 data points. And in this particular case, it was an older person with dementia going through the task of brushing their teeth. So it was video data. And we basically put it into our large language model, not ChatGPT, and I'll talk about that when I talk about ethics. But we put it into a large language model, and from our 1,000 data points, it generated 1,000,000 data points. And when we went back to look at and assess those additional data points that it collected and how accurate and representative they were and how well they fit into the distribution of our original 1,000 data points, it was actually with very, very high confidence. So while it is a limitation, it is also a source of solving that limitation as well. But there is a starting point that's needed here, and that is some kind of accurate large data set that it can use either to train the model or to synthesize new data as well. So once you have all that data, the next big step is the cleaning and the structuring of the data in order to improve the model performance. And this is removing, well, first of all, labeling what all the data points mean, right? So if we have a video of an older person going through a particular self-care activity or taking their medication or whatever it may be, we need to label what's happening in that video and what each data point means. And maybe that's labeling that, when my hands are over here, it means that I'm interacting with this particular object. Perhaps when my hand location is over here and I'm saying something, it means that I'm trying to figure out how to use it. So you need to label all the data as well. And so you can imagine if we're talking about millions of data points, there's some poor graduate students sitting out there that are, labeling this all by hand for the most part. And at this point, a lot of this labeling still does need to be done by hand, especially with complex behaviors like we see with older adults, in order, again, to improve the accuracy of the model. The better your data set, the better your model is going to be, right? The whole notion of garbage in, garbage out is very much true when it comes to generative AI, even more so than your quote unquote traditional approaches in AI as well. Once you have that, then you go through the model design. Typically, generative AI is based on neural networks and deep learning, again, invented by Professor Jeff Hinton of University of Toronto and many of his collaborators. And basically, once you design that architecture, you're ready then to start training it. Now, again, the nice thing here, well, it depends on who you ask. If you ask people who do not have an AI background, the nice thing here is there are a lot of systems and open source code and open access software that's being developed that doesn't require you to have to design your own architecture from scratch, right? Now, you ask the AI people, they don't like this because everyone claims they're an AI scientist now in some way. But, this is a really great step forward, though, for elder care because, and we've actually tried this, you can actually have caregivers who can go in and design their own large language model, their own generative AI approaches based on these tools that are readily available. They're out there. And if you do a quick search online for open source, open access generative AI or large language models, you're going to find a whole bunch of toolboxes, right from, that's based in Python, depending on your programming skills, to ones that have visual representation and user interfaces that you can easily plug together, almost plug and play in order to design your own system. So then you train the model, you feed the data all through, it develops the model's language understanding, and then the critical piece at the end is the evaluation, right? You always want to make sure you evaluate your models. For anyone who has played with things like ChatGPT, it is fraught with errors. We've heard things, of people trying to write papers using ChatGPT and ChatGPT actually making up references in papers that don't exist. So the technical term of this in generative AI is hallucinations. So ChatGPT and large language models can hallucinate things if not trained properly and corrected. And obviously in the space of elder care, we do not want the caregiver hallucinating when it's trying to provide support and assistance or guidance to an older person, especially in a really critical activity such as reminding take your medication or something, right? Where there could be really dire consequences for what you're doing. So when we start looking now at elder care, obviously, even ChatGPT agrees with all of us that there is a need for innovation in elder care. And, we have challenges that are known to all of us. Obviously, the aging population. With an aging population comes an increase in potential prevalence of things like chronic disease, dementia, mobility issues, sensory impairments, et cetera. But one of the bigger challenges that we're seeing, particularly in Canada, is a lack of workforce and a shortage of caregivers who can actually provide care. And I'm not just talking about paid caregivers. I'm talking about family caregivers. And I spoke a little bit about this in my talk on Monday. I'm sorry, this week has been so long. I think it was on Monday, where it's not uncommon anymore in places like Canada, that is a very large country, where you have the children of parents with dementia living in Vancouver, providing care to their parents who are 4,000 kilometers away in Toronto, right? Even, I'm a caregiver myself. My mom has dementia. My dad has pretty severe mobility issues. If you see me looking at my watch all the time right now, it's not because I'm trying to get out of here or something. I'm actually getting alerts from my parents' rooms saying they're in bed, they're out of bed, what their heart rate is, what their breathing rate is, and what their blood pressure is, right? And again, it's using these types of signals that are helping me to continue to be a caregiver even 10,000 kilometers away. And this is really where the need for new innovation happens. And again, we spoke about this on Monday, where researchers here at PolyU have really great expertise and have designed really beautiful systems when it comes to smart home technologies. Canada has spent a lot of time on developing systems for telehealth, telemonitoring, telerehab, et cetera, just because of the size and distance of Canada and the fact that we also have a very large northern community as well. So you think about bringing these two areas together right there. University of Toronto, AgeWell, PolyU, the Research Center for Institute for Smart Aging. We could really already make great strides by bringing these smart home technologies that activate locally with a lot of the distance monitoring and research that we're doing as well, and the technologies that are coming out. And again, we've been talking about how to continue these exchanges moving forward. So what are some areas where large language models can offer innovative solutions for seniors and for the caregivers as well? And again, according to large language model, it sees itself playing a large role across many different application areas. Here are just some examples, and as I go through this, I'll also talk a little bit about some of the work that we're doing as well back in Canada. So companionship is a big thing. So we had been looking a lot at the use of large language models on platforms like social robotics and also various smart home systems, basically to provide companionship and socialization to older people. During the pandemic, Canada was the worst basically developed country in the world with respect to deaths of seniors in long-term care. Now, you can tie that back obviously to a biological factor that resulted in death. But in fact, when you examine it further, many of those deaths resulted because of social factors, specifically loneliness. Many older people died of loneliness in our long-term care homes because they did not have a technology, even an iPad, because a lot of our long-term care homes in Canada do not have Wi-Fi. So something as simple, I see eyebrows go up. This is a fact. Something as simple as Wi-Fi, tablets, whether you're using Skype or Zoom, could have probably made a large difference in many people's lives. And so the fact that we can start doing things like large language models that can have conversations with older people that are more realistic and are tailored to the interests of that person could be a huge step forward. And this includes even things like, reminiscence therapy and things like that, where the device, whether it's a robot or a tablet, but again, using large language models, has that ability to have these kinds of conversations with seniors that are tied to their own lives, right? And in fact, we're working with a company based out of Barcelona now that are using large language models to actually regenerate images of the memories of older people, because maybe they don't have the photos of their childhood. They don't have the photos of the town or the village that they grew up in. But based on their rich descriptions that many people with dementia can still give, large language models are generating those photos for them so that they can have a visual aspect as well. Medication reminding. This is an area that, for the most part, at least in Canada, and I would say United States, we've stayed away from. There's always been this massive liability issue, right? In terms of developing technology for medication, the liability and the potential consequence if your technology does not do its job properly. If you remind someone to take medication, you don't know they took their med, they double dosed, there's an issue there. Can everyone just hear me if I just yell? No. They told me no. Okay. I do what I'm told. That's it. So again, generative AI, large language models can again use larger data sets about specific medication, a person's routine, but more importantly, information that it can source from pharmacies and pharmacists and caregivers about the issues that may happen with respect to things like double dosing, when they should take that medication, if they need to eat something when they take it, et cetera. And again, we've been approached by one of the largest pharmacies in Canada that want us to work with them to build large language models into their current databases, because we can basically gather this information from their own files, but from the internet in general and other medical sources, hopefully reliable ones, to do that. Now, health monitoring has kind of always been the big one in elder care. How do we monitor things like chronic diseases? How do we track various health parameters and then alert, their caregivers or their doctors or their OTs, their PTs, et cetera, when something is going wrong? Now, what large language models and generative AI can help us do now even better than before is to predict things before they happen, right? How do we actually go ahead and predict changes in person's cognition before that change actually happens so you can put an intervention in place sooner? How do we predict that someone's diabetes or congestive heart failure is going to worsen over the next 6 months because of all the data points that we're collecting and the models that we're generating, and then looking at the consequences of those data? Cognitive exercises, again, something that a lot of people and a lot of companies out there have been putting out technologies. For a long time, Canada was actually one of the leading countries in startups and cognitive exercise technologies. I'm not quite sure why, because there's very mixed evidence on using technology in these cognitive exercises. But again, it's something that in the minds of older people and their caregivers, they like going through and they like doing the word puzzles and the various things and the various cognitive exercises. So if they're happy doing it, fantastic. Maybe there's no hard clinical data that's showing that slowing down dementia or whatever else. But again, it's adding to things like socialization. It's adding to things like their level of happiness, et cetera. So, there's nothing wrong with these technologies as long as it's not making claims that, we're going to reverse your Alzheimer's, we're going to reverse your dementia. But again, large language models, generative AI can collect a lot more information, can tie that back into the health monitoring aspect, and then see what's going to happen with this particular person. And more importantly, personalize those cognitive exercises with far more specificity than we ever could before. And again, not requiring the intervention from a caregiver or someone in to go and play with a bunch of variables in the system itself. Daily schedule assistance. This tends to be more my area, supporting older adults with dementia through self-care activities by giving prompts and reminders. We've always tried to make these technologies adapt to the needs of the older person and change the way that it provides the prompts reminders, because not all of us go through our days in the same way or in the same order of activities. And, there's more than one way to complete a particular activity of daily living. So again, using generative AI and all the data that we're collecting on this person and synthesizing future data about the person, then we can actually customize these technologies better. And that's really the name of the game, especially with people with cognitive impairment, as we probably all know, right? You want to do things in a way that they feel comfortable with, that they're used to doing it in, because that's going to add to their ability to continue to do it on their own for as long as possible. Finally, emergency assistance, so connecting emergency services. Again, generative AI and large language models can customize what it's looking for. It could customize what a fall may look like based on video data that we're feeding into the system. And then from that, again, can come up with more customized assistance. So, there are probably more benefits to using LLMs and generative AI in elder care than just on this list. But this is what ChatGPT identified for us. So we'll focus on these 4. So as I mentioned, improved social interaction. Okay, so reduction of feelings of isolation and loneliness. I know, some of you are probably thinking, well, do we really want a robot to be socializing with our parents or our grandparents? Shouldn't it be us? And the answer is absolutely yes, it should be us. But we know we can't be there all the time, right? I can't be with my parents right now, so I need something that will be able to fill that gap and let me know that they're doing okay. Enhanced safety. So again, getting as close as possible to real-time health monitoring and providing alerts as quickly as possible, right? You look at the case of falls. Again, a well-known stat is the longer the person is lying on the ground, the least likely they are to recover, right? So we want to know that to fall right away. We want to get assistance to that person as quickly as possible. And we want to provide as much data as possible to those providing assistance so they know exactly what's happened, what the cause of the fall may have been, and how to provide help. Accessibility. So making information and assistance more accessible to elderly people and to their caregivers and families. Now, this is kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because again, if your large language models and the models that you're developing are not accurate and they're not being trained on accurate data, then people are going and they're finding out information about congestive heart failure that's just not accurate, right? The problem with using things like ChatGPT that basically just troll the entire World Wide Web to collect its information is it doesn't know what's good data and what's bad data. But that's where us as experts come into play, right? On helping to train these models so that we are only feeding it the good, accurate data that we know is important from our expertise. And as I mentioned, support for caregivers. So when I started this work many, many years ago, our primary customer was the older adult. That's no longer the case. Our primary customer is the caregivers, the family members. It's the family members that are buying these technologies and setting them up and maintaining them for their family members, for their loved ones, whoever else it may be. And so we need to also consider them as the customer. And we actually ran into one case study where we developed a technology that required the older adult basically to do so much maintenance on this thing and tweak the variables that they said, forget, it's too much work. So the more automation we can put in these things, the more flexibility we can build into the models so I can learn about the person through these large data sets, then the better. Thanks. So to kind of finish off here in the next few slides, I want to focus really more now on kind of things we need to consider moving forward with respect to applying things like large language models and generative AI. So there are some key design principles among many others that we need to obviously focus on. I'm going to go through some of these quickly, but really focus on a couple of them in a bit more depth. So obviously they need to be user-friendly. They need to have user-friendly interfaces. And we're starting to see that with more verbal-based interfaces than ever before, right? So things like, Google Home or Amazon Alexa or, equivalent devices where you can just basically speak to it seems to be the most natural interface that's currently available for older adults to be interacting with. Now, the problem is these devices, while they're pretty good at natural language processing and speech recognition, they're not, 100% great. And I see this with my own parents. They get very frustrated with their device. I was there one time, they were yelling at their Amazon Alexa because it wasn't doing what they were saying because they have accents. English is not their first language. But what we're starting to see is the use and the application of generative AI and large language models are actually significantly increasing the accuracy of these types of speech-based devices. Privacy and security, I'll talk about in a moment. Obviously, as I mentioned several times, the model needs to be reliable and accurate. Personalization, I've touched upon, and that's what large language models is letting us do more than ever. But one of the big things we're starting to see fall out of the use of large language models is emotional intelligence. Technologies that can respond with the right emotion based on what's happening with the older person. And if you watch a really good caregiver, a real caregiver, not a computer caregiver, this is what they're able to do. They're able to match the emotion of their response to help the person complete an activity, to calm them down if they're becoming agitated, to be a bit more demanding or commanding if the person is not taking their medications, but in a proper and empathetic way. Large language models is also allowing us to do this more and more because it's collecting information about the person. It's taking the data we trained on different types of emotion, and therefore it's matching the emotional intelligence as well. So ethical considerations and challenges, there are plenty here. This is a whole area of research just on its own. So we've been doing research on ethics and privacy and security of data and AI-based systems for many, many years. This is a whole new game now. Okay? This is one of those disruptive technologies that I would put up there with things over time. I sound like an old man now. Back in the day when we replaced horses with cars and when initial AI came out and changed the way we do computing, and now with quantum computers and electronic health records. This is a whole new ethical dilemma that we need to be looking at and thinking about. So what are some of the future directions in the use of large language models? Obviously, there's a lot of R&D work to be done across the different areas I spoke about. There's training and education. Again, what we've taught caregivers, what we've taught family doctors about the role of AI in medicine and health is different now. This is not the same thing as our typical neural network or a random forest, or you take your algorithm of choice. This is something different. And it's so different that even the person who invented it, Professor Jeff Hinton, has stood up and said, I don't know where this is going to go. And because of that, he's talking about policy and regulation. So Professor Hinton left his job at Google so that he can talk freely now about how generative AI, large language models, all the massive amounts of data being collected need better regulation and better policy. And when we talk about vulnerable populations like older adults, this can't be even more true. So to finish off, according to ChatGPT, it thinks very highly of itself because it says that it's going to be a very promising path for all of us to be looking at in order to address the current challenges of age tech, enhance quality of life, and support caregivers. And it encourages us, it implores us, which is kind of scary because it's kind of like, hey, look at me, I'm this potentially dangerous model, but you should use me, right? It encourages us to explore and invest in these technologies as we move forward. So we will. But again, we need to take into account all those aspects about the ethical considerations, the data privacy considerations, and everything else. And like we didn't do in 10, 15, 20 years ago when we started applying AI, we need to do these things first. And that's just my own personal opinion as a researcher in this area and as a caregiver. So with that, I thank you very much for having me. I hope you enjoyed seeing that. Some of that material is the first time I've ever seen it. And the final thing I'll just say is, again, there's a lot of research out there being done on large language models. Just don't go with ChatGPT or the ones that are commercially available. If you're truly interested, and feel free to reach out to me, there's a lot of researchers that we're working with and others that have developed their more ethical and safer versions of large language models that would probably be more appropriate for us to apply in the space of elder care. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex, for this very inspiring talk. We also like to thank ChatGPT. So I cannot believe how slides actually have been made by ChatGPT. Okay. So be careful, our professors. Okay. Next time our students submit PowerPoint, we need to double think. Okay. So I think really discuss a lot of related things. Okay, that I think for this area particularly. So actually, before inviting our audience to ask some questions, I actually would like to ask a question to one of you first. Now, after the presentation of Alex, can you imagine or can you guess what is his first degree? Any answers?
I don't even know if you know this, actually.
I know you better.
Yeah, let's see.
Actually, it's difficult to guess, right? Because he has been working on aging, knowing all these ChatGPT things. I'm not sure whether you really know that or because of ChatGPT. So, but anyhow, Alex's first degree is mechanical engineering. You even cannot imagine.
So to go one step further,
Okay.
I actually trained in aerospace engineering.
Aerospace engineering. Okay,
Yeah.
most of us. Then second degree, I think is master. Yeah. So can you imagine what is his master degree? Yeah, this is our Department of Biomedical Engineering. So actually, I'm correct, right? So the second degree is biomedical engineering. Then the third degree, PhD. Can you imagine that? No, this is why Alex became our peer fellow, you know, because it totally matches with our interdisciplinary research. Question, am I right? Just a joke. But the interesting is the third degree of Alex is rehabilitation engineering. Okay, this is why you know going to the aging area. But currently, Alex is associating with several departments in UT. The first one is occupational science and therapy, very natural because of rehabilitation engineering. Second is biomedical engineering, very natural. The third one, already very natural. Otherwise, he cannot discuss with us today, is computer science, computing. So this is Alex. Now you know how to ask questions to Alex, please.
And my postdoc was in gerontology. So
Okay.
I added a different discipline in there too, yeah.
So you can ask any questions now from all this field. Yes, okay.
How do they work? The purple dot, is that the end point? And what is it?
Yeah, good question. I don't know because ChatGPT. But from our experience, there is no end dot in this, right? This really should be a circular diagram that you're continually doing this. And the key thing with large language models is to continue to feed it better and better data as much as you can. And in fact, in our cases, in some of the projects we've done, we start with a general set of data, and then we add real-time learning in there so that data about the specific person is then being fed back in and the model is being regenerated. That's one of the nice things as well about large language models is you can develop the model very, very quickly. Like these things are being generated within minutes as opposed to, back in the day again, it would take us 24 hours to generate a model, right? So to reproduce the model over and over again was very challenging. Here, you can do it very quickly. Now that leads to a whole nother set of environmental issues that I won't get into unless someone asks me about it. But yeah, so this really should be a cycle. There's no end.
Yeah, thank you. I just add on a little bit, from my understanding, the purpose of the application, various applications, and as Alex mentioned, like feedback and a better model for applications. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Yes, there are female colleagues. Then after that, the last row is.
I was wondering your opinion on, balancing the workforce with the consideration, as you said, of the aging population, but also knowing that some of the workforce will be replaced by AI. So, when we're considering intake of students into these medical professions, how do we balance that?
Yeah, so that is a great question. So when I was talking about workforce, I was specifically talking about the caregiving workforce, right? And so we have two issues, and I'll just use Canada as an example. So one, we cannot attract people to take on caregiving roles, paid caregiving roles. And so we have a severe shortage of people in long-term care homes, a severe shortage of personal support workers, et cetera. So we need to fill that gap somewhere. The second is, again, we have a shortage of family-based caregivers as well. And the third aspect of that is family caregivers have to leave and take significant leave from their regular day job, so to speak, in order to provide care, right? So an example there is we were approached by an insurance human resource benefits company that asked us, well, how can we provide access to smart home systems as part of the benefit package we provide to our employees? Because then we can retain our workforce, because they can be a caregiver by sitting at their desk still and being productive, because now they're receiving data and information from the smart home systems that we paid for through their benefits. So, the workforce question is very complex and has, we didn't even touch on keeping older adults in the workforce longer, which Canada wants to do. And, will these AI technologies allow those individuals who want to stay in the workforce longer, help them to do that? But it is a very, very challenging topic area for us to be looking at with many different types of dimensions on it.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, next, when we ask question, can you also mention where you're from or what is your interest? Okay, I hope that's no privacy issue. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Frank Chen from CityU. I'm currently leading a large donation project sponsored by Bank of China, Hong Kong. So we are adopting a Netherlands home care model. So, okay, my question, okay. We already have so many physical devices like wearables, visuals, audio, sensors. Here is our headquarters of all the devices here. So we are struggling with kind of integration tasks, daunting tasks. Now comes the large language models. Can you say comments on your insight on how to use LLM to integrate all those things? We are still in the middle of integrating all the devices. Okay, thank you.
To answer your first question on interoperability, you see it's on this slide. And again, this is according to a large language model, it feels it can solve interoperability. I honestly don't know how it does that. So I don't have an answer for that. I still, I completely agree with you. Interoperability is just a big issue, and integration is a big issue in this area. Again, myself as a caregiver, I use 4 different apps to monitor my parents. And so I'm getting alerts from 4 different apps on my phone all the time. And sometimes it's redundant information. Sometimes it's different information. So I'm not quite sure how large language models can solve this. To your second point, and I know YP is going to take care of this right away. This is where, though, AI can play a better role, right? Because AI can be more logical in some cases than people are. People have a set way of doing things. They cannot tap into additional information right there on the spot because we just don't sometimes have that capability. But this is what things like large language models can do. It could tap into different sources of data very, very quickly and then come up with a more logical response to things, right? And that's where you're seeing these types of models being used more and more. Now, the problem is, do we equate caregiving and health to a logical operation? In some cases, yes, reading an MRI scan, reading a CT scan, it's a logical operation that AI has been shown to do better than doctors. But caregiving, matching emotion, those are not logical operators, right? And so again, those are things we need to be careful about in lumping everything into one box and saying, well, yeah, large language models, generative AI is going to solve everything in this particular case.
But I want to echo your question, actually. That is a really good question because I've been working on this area for so many years. And the issue that we always actually struggling is that we can provide a lot of technology and information sensors. The one big challenging actually is the false alarm. So as Alex mentioned, you have 4 apps, okay? So monitoring all different kinds of things. Then you will keep busy because there are false alarms. So whenever there's a lot of false alarms, the caregivers do not want to use that because waste their time. So in one of our incidents, in one of our NGO we serve, so ultimately there's an incident happened, very big. I will not go to details because ultimately become a legal issues and they fire quite a number of people. But the reason they have 3 monitoring systems to monitor elder people with dementia. But ultimately, when this incident happens, they turn off 2. Okay, no matter switch off or just turn the sensor around so that the sensor will not monitoring actually because they generate too many false alarms. The system we developed actually is on. So ultimately, our information become the evidence to their lawsuit. So because we capture something, but even ours, they turn off our volume. So later on, actually, we did not allow them to turn on the alarm volume. Basically, we force always their mobile phone will alarm. So this kind of things. So this is why I think what you mentioned is really a good topic. So those are the people working on this large language model, whatever AI. So this is something we really need to think about, maybe join the force together. So ultimately try to reduce all these false alarms and to make all the sensors really work. Otherwise, as an engineer, we keep building all the things, but ultimately will serve the real purpose or not. So we'll discuss it offline later. Yeah, thank you so much. So we'll give other audience. So please do not be so quiet. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Mo from Department of Chinese and Bilingual Studies. So I do some research on healthy aging, particularly doing neuroimaging and seeing how aging impacts like cognitive functions in the brain. So my question is about how do you see the future of the applicability of large language models in elderly healthcare in underdeveloped countries? Because I think a lot of these models are available in developed countries. That means that the healthcare system, particularly the elder healthcare system, gets improved and improved. But in the countries where these language models are not available, right, you cannot do most of these things. Like in Hong Kong, we don't have actually a large language model for Cantonese. So this is one of the things which maybe we can do something about it.
Yep.
So I feel like the gap between underdeveloped countries and developed countries is gonna get bigger and bigger while we have these large language models only available in developed countries. So how do you see the future and how do you think that we can kind of deal with this challenge?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So first off, from a cultural and language aspect, I think large language models is going to make it easier for us to overcome that barrier than we have had in the past. And we've already looked at some use of large language models in other languages as well back in Canada, and particularly looking at it, for example, using large language models to restore some indigenous languages. And that's in collaboration with some folks in Taiwan and in Canada. Now, that that equity piece is the bigger worry in my mind, right? So right now, to run these large language models, you basically need massive amounts of computing. It's all cloud-based. This, ties back to my environmental comment as well, that if you look at all the inquiries that ChatGPT takes in 24-hour period, and you add up all the power consumption that is required to run that server, it's the equivalent of powering 1,000 homes in the United States. So right there's a massive issue as well. So what I'm seeing a lot of colleagues start to do is work on what they're calling light language models, light large language models. I guess they're kind of small language models. And these are models actually that do not need to run on large massive computers, can actually eventually run on a smartphone locally. And so this is where they're seeing kind of the next phase of this whole notion of large language models going, is these lighter versions that can run on your smartphone device and therefore make them more equitable in terms of their use. Now, there's pros and cons to that, right? The cons obviously is if it's a lighter version that's local, it's not accessing all the data, quote unquote, in the world. It's probably more data that's specific about the person in the context of use. So it may not be as accurate as the large models are, like ChatGPT in some cases. At the same time, it may be more accurate because it's being trained for a specific person. So if we think from a caregiving perspective, if I can train a large language model specifically for my parents, then it's going to hopefully get rid of a lot of that noise and hallucinations and other things that are currently happening in these models. So there is work being done. I would say the leading group right now is out of University of Ulster in Northern Ireland. And again, I'm happy, if anyone's interested in there, I'm happy to just reach out to me. I'm happy to send you the links and stuff. And everything they're doing is all open access, open source. You can download one of their light versions and give it a try and for your own application purposes. So.
Thank you. I just want to adding on for our CBS colleagues. Actually, we are working with two groups. One is Elaine here, another one is Mini. So we not only record the voice, but also record the ultrasound image, real-time ultrasound of the tongue motion. So therefore, maybe we can discuss more later, yeah, for all this opportunity. So Hongyu, then I see others. Hongyu, please.
Thank you so much, Professor Alex. Give us so many excellent topic. So I have you have sharing a lot about the elder people care using the AI or large models, the benefits for the elder people or even the caregivers. But there are a lot of team or people doing one thing is that using model for disease diagnosis or even the treatment guidance. So maybe I want to ask you suggestions about how to comment this method. Is it that feasible or credible? Or in other words, how can we improve the credibility of it? Thank you so much.
Okay, so I hope I understood your question. If I missed something, just let me know. So, one thing that, an approach that we've taken so far in this area of elder care has always been developing model for a specific thing, right? So whether it's for dementia, whether it's for diabetes, whether it's for arthritis, whether it's for toileting or taking medication. And the problem with that is going back to this comment before, is we end up having multiple systems that somehow you need to stitch together and to work together. And maybe I'm starting to understand why things that can do interoperability now is, with a large language model, you can hopefully start training a single model to do all these different things and not have to only understand one specific disease type or whatever else, that it can understand multiple diseases, and which is important with older adults because, you never have an older person. Well, you really have no one who just has one disease, right? They all have comorbidities that all interact with each other. They all take medications for. And so having a model that can understand all these things together, how they interact together, how the medications interact with each other, hopefully will end up in a more effective and safe system. I didn't answer your question at all, did I? So Did I miss something? Did I answer it? Okay, okay, good. Sorry.
Okay, let's see any other questions from this side or middle. I'm not sure how many minutes we still have. 10 minutes. Oh, okay. So we can still ask a lot of questions. Anything? Yes, Joy, please.
Hi, I'm Joy from biomedical engineering department. I have a question that since there are so many technology we are using right now, for example, like phones or AR and VR. So how to incorporate these technologies for the elderly? For example, some people, they are reluctantly to welcome this new technology as they're getting older. They don't want to learn and they don't want to use it. So they want to stick to the traditional way of their life. And however, some people, they are like very excited about this new technology. So I wonder, like, since technology is always moving forward, how can we incorporate all the technologies together and to make sure that most people can get benefit and enjoy from it?
Right. So my first comment and answer is, you can't force people to use what they don't want to use, right? And one thing we have to recognize is technology is not going to be the answer for everyone out there and for all older adults. There's going to be older adults who do not want to use VR or AR. There's going to be older adults that do not want to use a voice-based system like Amazon or Google. So it's really trying to figure out what do they want to use, right? What can they use, and then picking the right approach for them. And so that really requires, if you developed a VR system to deliver rehabilitation or exercise, you need to think of an alternative, right? That it just can't be, well, if you don't like VR, you can't use our system, you can't benefit, right? And so maybe there's a VR-based system, but then there's also a non-VR immersive version that's just on a regular television screen that's still taking them through the exercises. So that's one thing we always have to recognize, right? Is that technology is they're just tools that we are using in providing care and assistance to older people. The ultimate, I don't know how to continue this analogy, but I guess the ultimate person who carries these tools are the caregivers, the family doctors, the OTs, the PTs, and we're just building the tools for them to able to apply to provide the best care. We're not trying to replace them with these tools, but to give them an opportunity to provide more effective care. So you need to have alternatives to these different tools that are out there, right? Like even for myself, I cannot do VR. I throw up. Guaranteed. I have 3 students doing VR projects. Every time I've been a test subject for them, I end up getting sick. So VR is not going to be a solution for me, right? And that's not just because of my dislike of it. It's because I just can't manage it for some reason. So you need to always look at these alternatives, right? And that includes the user interface, the way that people interact with the device. It needs to be multimodal in terms of the interactions.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Some colleagues actually are working in the related area. Yes, please.
Okay. Thanks, Professor. Thanks for sharing. So I'm a postdoc from the Department of Computing. So I'm working on the natural language processing. And I'm wondering, so one of my concerns is if we really want to design an LLM for the elder care. So the most important concern is the data shortage. So I just Googled several roughly Googled. I haven't found some works they designed the LLM for the elder care, and also I haven't found some open source data set. So if we really want to hands-on to design such a LLM, so what's your opinion to how we solve the data shortage, and could you recommend a specific application scenarios that we can really hands-on?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. So that goes back to my earlier comment that this is where we need to collaborate together, right? So, you're not going to find many open source data sets. And if you do, they're going to be very small, right? Like we have a data set of 1,000 data points of falls for older adults, right? Again, we generated a synthetic data set using LLMs, but, you're not going to find large data sets out there. So it comes down to collaboration and partnership. So we need to work, University of Toronto and PolyU, we need to work together to join our data sets to do simultaneous data collections in our respective countries, so that we can double our efforts on this and have more partners come in and triple and quadruple our efforts to generate these data sets. And then we need to share them, right, with the rest of the community. Computer science areas like AI, robotics, were basically established on shared data sets, right? And it's always a competition. Here's a data set, who can build the fastest neural network to classify the data points. We need to be doing those kinds of things as well. So taking lessons from other disciplines in order to build up this specific discipline, the data that we have. Now, the complication we have, obviously, is it's sensitive data. It's health data, right? So how do we share that? Canada, we're awful in this area. Our regulations are so overstructured. My university lab is across the street from my hospital lab. I cannot take data from this lab to this lab because they're two different institutions unless I get a data sharing agreement, which takes a year to put in place, right? Ridiculous. So this also goes back to the policy aspect of how do we work together to convince our governments, our ethics boards, our regulatory bodies on how do we do this better? Because at the end of the day, we're just going to be having the same discussion over and over again, that data does not exist. So.
Thank you, Alex. So for our just a moment, for our computing postdoc, I just want to ask a question to you. Now, assuming that we'll give you large enough data set, are you convinced to working in this area, LLM plus elderly care, after Alex talked?
What do you mean convinced?
Yeah.
I can hands-on. If I really have
basically, if you have like a post, okay, you can apply. Well, you apply to like something related to aging plus LLM. Okay.
YP is basically asking you, is Alex right or is he wrong?
Yes, of course, I can try.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, please.
Hi, Alex. My name is Simon Yang. I'm in the School of Design, but the reason I'm here, I actually own a company, train and hire what we call community health giver. People can hire us. So I'm particularly interested, we talk about a lot of data set or security or sharing. Can you give some example what data people feel insecure of sharing? Actually, to be honest, I had all my customer, every service, obviously we have picture, we have video. All my customers willing to share the data, assuming I don't give out the name, their address, those data. Without those, can you guys, data still useful?
Yeah. So that's a fantastic question, and one that we have done some work on. So first off, we found it's very individualized. Some people, myself, you can have all the data on me that you want. I don't care. My brother-in-law and my sister won't even have a Google smart home system in their home because they're so worried that it's listening to them and collecting data. So it comes down to individual preference, we found. Another big aspect we found, though, is if we educate people on the data being collected and what the data is being used for, then they're far more likely to be accepting of it. The third thing that we also found out in a study is, again, part of that education piece, that a lot of studies in the past have always just asked the question, would you accept cameras in your home? And 90% of the people said no. We redid the study where we changed the question and it said, would you accept cameras in your home if it meant that it allowed you to age in your own home? And 90% of the people said yes. Now, people say you're biasing the question. Maybe so, but that's the situation a lot of our older people are facing, right? So you need to also be transparent with them on what's happening. I think the other big thing is, there are cultural differences as well, and difference, between Hong Kong and Canada. And a lot of our privacy rules have been put into place by our federal government or our provincial governments that base it on other kind of more disastrous situations, right? Than some of the things that we're talking about, the information. So, you know, to finish off on your last part of that question is, you know, there's no point, a large language model or an AI model will not be able to personalize itself to the person to provide better care if we strip it of so much personal information that it can't do that, right? And so again, it's where's that kind of fine line between the privacy aspects, what a person will allow information about them to be used versus making a system that's so generic, it's not going to help the person out as well. So these are ongoing questions. And these are actually questions, again, that I think PolyU and U of T could be looking at together, doing comparisons of Hong Kong versus Canada, what the policies are, you know, how we can be working together to influence some of this. Because, you know, with government, as you all know, they don't know what they don't know. And often that's a lot. So if we can educate them by not just what's happening within Canada or within Hong Kong, but what's happening else around the world, that'll help to make our case, I think, a lot stronger as well.
Thank you. Considering time, let's see whether there's a last question. Last chance. So if no, let's thank Alex again for this wonderful and inspiring talk. Thank you so much.
We have a small souvenir for you. This is just a plaque as a token of appreciation.